Hey guys, so this week in class we're going to be looking at a whole bunch of more advanced compression techniques than you may have seen before, and sort of talking about compressors just generally. So I thought it might be easier if you saw me demonstrate these inside Pro Tools before class. So the first technique I'm going to show you guys is something that's often referred to as series or sometimes serial compression, and that's just the idea of putting one compressor after another compressor. And the advantage of using series compression, I find, is that you can actually get away with a lot more gain reduction and a lot more dynamic control, and it still remains quite transparent. Obviously, you're always going to hear the sound of the compression, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I find I can get away with a lot more gain reduction before I start to hear the artifacts that I don't want to hear from the compression. So the way I'm going to set it up, and this is how I would usually do it, is I'll use a fast compressor. That one's going to grab hold of any of the transient material and the loudest parts of the vocal. And then following that, I'll be using a slower compressor that is more there to gently level the overall sound of the vocal. In a typical real-world scenario, I would probably use two different models of compressor, maybe something fairly characterful and aggressive for the first compressor, just really grabbing onto those loud peaks and making sure they don't jump up way above the mix, and then probably something a little bit more I guess something like an LA2A or Fairchild, two compressors that we'll talk about in class this week. And they would normally be there just to give the vocal its overall tonality and kind of character. But for this demonstration, I'm just going to be using the Pro Tools stock plugins. So you guys can try it all at home. And I would actually really encourage you to try it at home, because it's one thing to watch me set these up, and an entirely different thing to get it happening yourself. So let's jump on in. Okay, so here we've got a recording of an acoustic guitar and a lead vocal, and we're going to try to use our series or serial compression technique to get this lead vocal to just sit in the mix a little bit better, and rein in some of these dynamics that you can see in the waveform here. We'll just have a listen without any compression at all.
The horizon rolls underfoot as we walk on, and the silhouettes lose their mystery as we draw closer. We will forge ahead in the fading light, chasing silhouettes, chasing them down, oh, chasing love.
Okay, so I'm just going to turn off the vocal reverb send here, and I'm going to put the vocal in solo so that we can hear what's going on a little bit better. And in my first insert point, I am inserting an instance of AUD303 compressor limiter. I'm going to adjust my attack time here to about sort of 7 or 8 milliseconds. I find to work pretty well for a fast compressor on vocals. And your release time, I'm dialing right down to 5 milliseconds, which is as fast as it goes on this compressor. 4:1 usually gets you out of trouble. And your threshold is going to obviously depend on your source material.
The horizon rolls underfoot as we walk on.
Okay, so I'm pulling that down until I see about 3 dB of gain reduction.
We will forge ahead in the fading light.
And you really just want this compressor to be grabbing onto the loudest parts of the vocal.
Chasing love.
So now, of course, our compressor is actually reducing the overall signal level of our vocal now. So we need to apply some makeup gain.
The horizon rolls underfoot as we walk on.
And that'll compensate for that level loss that we're getting through the compressor. That's our fast compressor setup. For our slow compressor, I'm just going to grab another instance of AUD3 compressor limiter, and I'll leave them both up so you can see the difference between the two. For a slow compressor, look, 10 milliseconds is probably fine on the attack time. Release, I'm going to set to 30 milliseconds. We might adjust these as we hear the vocal. And I'm going to use a slightly gentler ratio of 2 to 1.
Rise and rolls on the foot as we walk on, and the silhouettes lose their mystery as we draw close.
And this compressor is doing a fair bit more gain reduction, so we're going to use a little bit more makeup gain to compensate for that.
Chasing them down, chasing them down, oh, chasing love.
Okay, so I'm going to put this vocal back into the mix with the guitar and turn that reverb back on so you can hear how that slots in now.
The horizon rolls on the foot as we walk on, and the silhouettes lose their mystery as we draw closer.
I'll just turn those compressors off so you can hear the difference.
The horizon rolls on the foot as we walk on, and the silhouettes lose their mystery as we draw closer. We will forge ahead in the fading light, chasing silhouettes, chasing them down, oh, chasing love.
So as you can hear, the vocal sits still a lot better in the mix. You can hear a bit more of the detail in the singer's voice. Just so we can get a visual kind of representation of that, I'm going to actually record this vocal with that compression on to a new audio track, which I'll just do here, a mono audio track, and I'll call that vocal recording or something like that. And you'll actually be able to see on the new waveform that we generate how much more in control that is.
On the foot as we walk on, and the silhouettes lose their mystery as we.
So you can see there already all of those peaks have been ironed out. Bits that were sticking way out before are really a lot more under control. And especially when we get to this section here. That really loud peak at the beginning of the chorus has been sort of reined in, and the compression is quite transparent.